A building where you want to do research, you try and increase the interaction between people, the possibility of that. We think that architecture deals with history, and it has to deal with the past, but it really deals with aspirations.
The XUV 500.
Monocoque with an east-west engine.
Headlamp steering lights.
Voice commands.
Electronic stability program.
With hill hold and hill descent control.
That product would not have happened if MRV was not there.
MRV is a great story, and there are many people writing that story today. When Mahindra was started, it started really with a picture of idealism. It was created with an aspiration of building a new country, and building a new country on the back of technology.
A truly Indian company with Indian genes, Indian DNA, and a company that has always aspired to be world-class and not be satisfied with something in a small volume, and therefore have a vision, aspiration far bigger than what our size would justify sometimes.
All big ideas usually have humble origins. They start with very simple objectives and requirements, and so too is the case with the MRV.
When I landed here, 13th October 1993, and stood in Nasik in front of this building that was called R&D, I asked, where's the rest of it? And I was told, this is it. And I said, oh my gosh, what have I done?
The initial objective was simply to find a place for expansion of R&D facilities.
That was the beginning of my thinking that this infrastructure cannot take us to a world-class, globally competitive company that can produce products that can compete with the best in the world.
We had just produced the Scorpio, which happily turned out to be a great success. And so we knew that we were going to be around and to be players in the future. But we also knew that if we were going to compete with the best in the world, then we could not do it in the facilities that we had at Nasik at the time. If Mahindra was really going to survive in the long term, then incrementalism was not the answer. We had to leapfrog. That was why what was simply an exercise in increasing capacity became a kind of defining dream for all of us. The idea was to make the name evocative, not to simply say Mahindra Research Center and to make it sound like some kind of functional edifice. The whole idea was to create a very idyllic place for technology people, for engineers. Given that we started in the 90s and ultimately it was inaugurated in 2011, that gives you a sense of how arduous the process was of making MRV a reality.
Part of the reason was that we were first focusing on a location in the suburbs of Mumbai. Unfortunately, because of difficulty in acquiring land, that project never could take off.
I don't want to liken it to building the pyramids because they took a lot longer than the MRV. But yes, it was our own pyramid and we got it done. The moment we scaled up our aspiration, it became clear to me that this would have to be a co-located R&D facility for both our automotive and tractor businesses. That's why it had to be a corporate project. And at that point, I turned to Prochi, who is not an engineer, and I asked her whether she would serve as the project manager for this.
I didn't even know how to change a light bulb, and I still don't know how to change a light bulb. I don't think many people thought that a woman could head this project, and especially a woman like me who's considered right-brained and perhaps slightly flaky at that time, at least.
She put together a competent team, a kind of dirty dozen, if you will, within the group.
They were not high-flying people. Most of them were very understated. There were just 13 of them. And they gave it everything they had.
The rest, as they say, is history. There was no shortage of challenges at all. And I suppose that's what made the ultimate success of MRV even sweeter.
This is perhaps the only R&D center in the world where automotive and tractor R&D is being done together. Sounds very easy on paper, but was a big challenge. And because the culture, the thinking, the approach were different in the two businesses because they were two independent businesses.
It was not going to be a center for one division. It was a center for M&M. So we had to put everything together, whether it is people, whether it is equipment.
Therefore, we were looking for something called scale in product development, something that not many people have attempted. People have attempted scale in manufacturing, but scale in product development was something that we wanted to attempt.
At some point of time, we put it all together and Charles came to me and said, do you know what's happened? This project is now twice as large as we had originally envisaged.
The company had grown. Both the research and development departments had grown in both the divisions. They had big plans, and obviously the old plans could not work.
And it was a necessary growth because so many years had elapsed since we first started planning it.
They used to tell me, we have been hearing about MRV. Some people told me from my childhood. So there was resistance from people to move to Chennai. But then once a decision was taken, everybody decided that we have to back this decision and we are going to set up an MRV at Chennai.
Chennai was the mine. It was the mine of this ore, of the best engineering talent that you could find in India and arguably in the world. If the idea was to create an iconic building, one that would symbolize our aspirations, our desire to be the best, then you had to get the best architect. He was the architect laureate of India.
We wanted the best, very simply the best, because we wanted a place which will serve generations in Mahindra.
I also knew from my experience in having studied architecture and having been taught by Charles, that Charles was a humanist architect. He was not somebody to creating simply iconic buildings and structures or monuments. His preoccupation always was, how do the spaces work? How do they make people behave? How do people interact?
You never would think that you're an R&D center of a company. And it's a grand entrance that sets the whole mindset of what you're about to see.
Architecture was just a means to an end. The end was human dignity, the end was human creativity, the end was creating spaces which made people happy.
The crowning achievement of the center is the green plaza in the middle. It's a space that has water bodies, that has pathways that are not linear, that move in different diagonals, and therefore they create a kind of sense of the unknown. He's created a wonderful effect with mirrors around that plaza, which multiplies the perception of space, creates a sense of infinity.
I think a research facility needs a level of intrigue. And I've been there since inception and I've grown with it for so many years. Still, I find it mysterious. It has many entrances and exits, and you could turn a corner and you could find something unexpected, dramatic, and there could be walkways, bridges connecting different areas.
I think what he's done will be recognized as really a crowning design achievement. The time when I really felt a sense of enormous satisfaction was at the inauguration, when we had Dr. Abdul Kalam as our chief guest. And I remember I was walking around the facility with him, showing him the facility. Suddenly, through a large window, the mountain range that abuts MRV was visible. And Dr. Kalam stopped and said, "Is that part of the property, that hill?" And I said, "No." And he scratched his chin and said, "Take it." I said, "Excuse me," and he said, "Take the hill." I don't think he was simply being acquisitive and saying, take the property. That's not who Dr. Kalam is. I think what he was saying was, always set your aspirations high. And that's what MRV is about. It is about making ordinary people do extraordinary things.
When you are inspired by some great purpose, some extraordinary project, all your thoughts break their bounds. Your mind transcends limitations. Your consciousness expands in every direction. You will find yourself in a new, great and wonderful world.
Very first part in any project that you take up at MRV is to define the product very, very accurately.
We have knack of understanding the customer's unmet need. And that's not just by way of assuming and presuming, but we have a structured process.
Then we convert that into engineering requirements. Idea is to bring road to the lab and the lab to the laptops.
We have to have different types of analysis, which gives you early alarms in terms of what can go wrong, at what point in time it can go wrong, and how one can fix it.
The idea is that we should have the ability to find all the faults in the lab, on the road, or on the laptop before the customer is able to find out when he is using and driving the product.
I will not be at all surprised if in India, what we have in MRV as an infrastructure for engine development is absolutely the best that anybody has.
The first prototype is born here, then it is tested for reliability. It is tested to deliver various use and abuse conditions of the customer.
The second one is NVH. I remember when we had first started NVH in Nasik, we had a dingy little place and we had all kind of jugaad equipment that we had put in place because there was no budget.
The NVH role is now to deliver an outcome. They can deliver an outcome by making sure that all vehicle system people are designing products to a particular level of NVH, which is benchmarked in the beginning of the program.
Electronics. Again, if I go back to Nasik, we had a small room where we had some wires, cables going here, there, and everywhere.
For an electronics engineer, it's now become delight to use software for delivering outstanding entertainment, infotainment, telematics, and diagnostics, and slowly inching towards what I would call a connected car kind of a phenomenon. The lab that is most busy in terms of delivering innovations for the customer is the electronics lab.
There are just three examples, but you can almost take any vertical and you will find that what we have today in MRV in terms of the infrastructure, it is as good as almost what anybody would have.
What's important for a product development facility that develops vehicles is that it's not enough to make the vehicle. You need to drive it.
We've added test tracks here, which were not there earlier. Functional test tracks, advanced durability tracks, gradability tracks.
You look out of any window in MRV, you can see this camouflaged vehicle flapping by and you can hear the engine throbbing. It's very important to feel the vehicle, to drive the vehicle.
That gateway is literally, I would say, the policeman, in the sense that nothing that fails in their hands can be allowed to go, and whatever has to fail in their hands.
At the time that the MRV was being finished and people were moving into it, we had another iconic product that we were in the middle of developing. The now very successful XUV 500. The XUV for Mahindra was a bigger leap technologically than the one we made with the Scorpio, because we were making a car without a chassis. And we had never done that before. This was a car in which we were putting in telematics or in-car electronics of a different order completely.
Second one is the tractor Arjun Novo that came out last year.
The most technologically advanced tractor in India, produced in India, with the synchromesh gearbox, with multiple choices of speeds for pre- and post-harvesting requirements of the farmer, as well as giving a very stylish wraparound electric lamps.
Mahindra Tractors is the largest selling tractor brand in the world by volumes. We wanted to use Novo to reposition the Mahindra brand as pioneering technology. One of the strong technology features of the Novo is its lift capacity. The other area is, of course, farmers run tractors in the season for very long hours, at times 22 to 24 hours non-stop. Customers are now in season able to very comfortably run the product almost non-stop. So that's another area of strength. And there are several other such areas where we are way ahead of competition.
I tend to think that time has come somewhere it'll happen when the whole practice of how we produce crop might be different than what we have been doing for the last several generations. And that might have a fairly significant change in what a tractor looks like. Perhaps somebody is going to define or design a very different machine someday, and I hope that we are that company.
What we would require for a competitive advantage in times to come would be our ability to do technology development. I think that's the way most organizations have grown. Maybe others have taken 30, 40 years of doing product development and then venturing into technology development, whereas for us, the curve is probably 1/3 shorter. Mind you, we are the only ones who are in two-wheelers, trucks, tractors, and construction equipment, and auto, of course.
MRV is not Fortress MRV. Think of the Mahindra R&D ecosystem as a network with many nodes. MRV certainly is one of the most distinctive nodes, but it is part of a network, part of a neural network in which many nodes will emerge in the future as we spread our footprint across the globe. Already, Mahindra North American Technical Center in Detroit, or Seoul, given SsangYong Motors' presence in our group, or our Chinese facility with Mahindra Ueda, all of these are thriving, robust nodes.
Way back in 2002, the task of taking Indian products to the international market, I had taken that as a challenge. At times, it was so frustrating while you dialogue and interact with the people. When you say that, oh, you came from India, who's known for making and using bullock carts, how are you here to sell the automobiles? From there, today, we could venture into many territories, and this was not by accident. This was part of the international strategy which got evolved. We've been selling our products in the mature markets of Europe, Australia, New Zealand. We have sold the vehicles in South and Central American markets.
We have proven ourselves, frankly, and I think it's others who have worried about whether they can survive in Indian automotive industry, at least coming from outside. We have managed quite well.
When you look for rational arguments to say why something will succeed, you're usually going to deliver a product or a service or an outcome that is not extraordinary, because it has been defined within certain constraints of what you know. The biggest reward you can get in business is to have outcomes that fully exceed what you had envisioned in the beginning. And MRV is a shining example